An impressive army of God's kids are arising who understand their role and their opportunity through the various media platforms that are available. This army will be instrumental in changing society's negative soundtrack, which seems to dominate the atmosphere. Probably even more important, they'll begin to neutralize the profound negativism and testifying of the devil that currently issues even from so many Christians. What dominates in media becomes, as it were, the soundtrack to all else that's taking place. Even as a movie has a soundtrack that's key to its success or failure, media provides the soundtrack for society itself, thus influencing its chances for success or failure. To see society transform, we've got to march to a transforming new melody. This must happen, and it will happen. The Renaissance will hit a turbo of sorts by 2025, and the rise of this Renaissance media army will be tremendously important to that acceleration. Even as David had to arise and shut the negative, intimidating mouth of Goliath, so too this Davidic media army will arise and change the narrative. They will understand that we overcome the enemy by the word of our testimony, and will therefore search out testimonies everywhere. They will find every creative way to brag about heaven, about the attributes of heaven, and about the fruit of the Spirit that are displayed in practical ways here on earth. This is a big assignment, and the sons and daughters of the King will be up for it. By 2030, this will be perhaps the most efficient force on all of the mountains, and they'll provide the drumbeat for the overall rising army of the lovers of God. The atmospheric shift will be dramatic. Jeremiah 15 and verse 19 says, "You will stand in my presence, and if you speak noble words rather than worthless ones, you will be my spokesman." Anyone who has a significant call on the mountain of media must recognize that being a spokesman for God is your privileged assignment. To some degree, we're all invited to be his spokesman, and to some extent, we're all to carry the word of our own testimony that contains the platform for what we speak. But if you specifically have a divine assignment to significantly impact media, it will be because you've become a steward of noble communication rather than a promoter of worthless communication. Other Bible translations of Jeremiah 15:19 speak of being able to take the precious from the vile. Your effectiveness on this mountain of media isn't determined by your ability to mobilize social networks, produce a television show, edit a newspaper, direct a radio program, or perform some other skill of leveraging media. You can be a Christian with a huge following, yet still be making almost no kingdom advancement because you misunderstand what your assignment is. Whether it's your Facebook page, your newspaper, your television show, your newsletter, or whatever, you must be able to be someone who can separate the precious from the vile and the noble from the worthless. The original Hebrew word for precious means valuable, brightness, clear, costly, excellent, precious, reputation, and honorable women. How interesting that that's one of the definitions. The word for vile means to shake, to quake, to be morally loose, worthless, or prodigal. You don't want to champion that which is shaking, but rather that which is valuable. Furthermore, our assignment through media is mainly to be done in a covert manner and not in an overt way. Overt proselytizing basically takes place only on the mountain of religion. On every other mountain, the kingdom advances through God's ways, displayed in an atmosphere of freedom that then brings attention to Him within the hearts of those who are experiencing the blessing that comes with those ways. The kingdom way of doing things always has the best outcomes, though it often requires us to exercise patience long enough to see those outcomes fully made reality. The long-term renaissance that will take place on the mountain of media will ultimately have to do with even unbelievers and secular institutions realizing that noble communication is the new standard for how news and reporting is most profitable. God's ways are the better ways of doing things, and among his outcomes are extended credibility and financial viability for those who commit to doing things his way. This new standard bearing for media will eventually go institutional, as the new guidelines for media that advance through educational institutions will intentionally embrace the goals of noble and valuable reporting. It will be generally understood that reporters have an inherent responsibility to advance precious and hopeful things as opposed to being instruments of terror or scandal. This is the present status quo in media, but it will greatly change in the coming years as God's hope-filled media army arises with understanding and intentionality in their kingdom assignment. This noble assignment is available for engagement even today, and we can each do our part just by what we communicate in our next Facebook post, our next email, Instagram, our tweet. Hope is the endangered commodity of the age, and every child of the King should be in the business of manufacturing and reproducing it. In the coming years, this mountain of media will be the great releaser of hope, as opposed to being the great releaser of fear. As Christians, we'll finally stop releasing fear ourselves through our irresponsible use of media. The ministries built on promulgating fear will either change or lose their financial base. It will be a better day. I don't mean to cheer against them, as many of them are as sincere as the 10 spies were in their giant magnifying mission in the Promised Land. Yet it's just as wrong and just as faulty a mission today as it was then. We will ultimately know that we're winning the battle against the enemy on this mountain when the world itself is more hopeful than fearful. So, Media Army of God, arise with hope in your wings and release the soundtrack of good news through every outlet that you have. Let hope arise.